Hi, I'm Ken Wild. I'm the Virgin Islands National Park's archaeologist and cultural resource manager. I have had the pleasure to have been able to work on Hassel Island for almost 30 years, both conducting archaeological research and helping others work in the archives to uncover the history of this island. Today we're going to take that effort to uncover these stories of the past using living histories of people who have lived here and who have worked here that can help us to understand the island's history and past. In the process of doing this project, we've discovered many things about the island. We've also discovered that we are losing these stories every day. During the project, we actually have lost people before we could even get the interviews in. So hopefully this is just the beginning of the stories that will come forward to us as we continue our efforts to understand and preserve the history of Hassel Island. Just a little background on Hassel Island. It's about 134 acres of land. It's got a highest elevation of just 267 feet above sea level. It is located in the western side of St. Thomas's Charlotte Amalie Harbor. It was actually made into an island in the 1860s. It was originally a peninsula. They cut it after a cholera epidemic, an earthquake, and a tsunami. Today the island is administered by about 95% of it by the National Park. The other percent is being administered by the Department of Natural Resources, and together we work to preserve and interpret the island's rich and varied history. Though it is a relatively small island, it is a veritable timeline of Virgin Islands history. Preserved in its archaeological sites and ruins is a testament to the importance it has played in history globally, both militarily, politically, and in an economic capacity. Hassel Island preserves remains from pre-Columbian Indians through the Spanish conquest. It saw the age of piracy, the rise of the Danish colony. It holds some of the only Napoleonic era fortifications on American soil. It was one of the main reasons the islands were transferred to the United States in 1917 before we entered World War I against Germany. The maritime history of Hassel Island is a prominent focus of these interviews because it served this industry through its transition from sail to steam power. So many of the people that are interviewed in this documentary talk about working at Creque Marine and how they saw the industry at work and the stories they have to tell us about it.
I'm Dick Avery, originally from upstate New York. And I came down here and started a little boatyard in Frenchtown. But directly across the channel at Hassel Island, there's a fantastic ancient railway that hauled big ships with, and most people didn't know anything much about that whole operation, but down through the years I had an opportunity to see it operate a few times before it went to pieces. And I also used to go over there and look at it because it was so interesting. It was a steam boatyard, or steam engine, and instead of having cable, it had giant keys, giant chain links, and they would go around the pulleys, which had giant links sticking out, and most of that is still there to be seen. I watched about one of the last boats ever hauled on it, and they got her up and halfway out of the water. They were doing pretty good, but something let go and it stayed there for a long time, weeks. and they fussed around with it. But it was a very interesting piece of machinery, and I kept trying to get people to look at it and photograph it and save it somehow. And I don't think very much of that ever happened. But the main thing about the links were that they didn't have any long cables or chains or anything like that. They just had links that probably weighed about 200 pounds of each. And but they were in there built solid. I mean, they were just an amazing piece of machinery. And the links wouldn't get any hard spots when they were going around the sprockets. And the sprockets were like rear things on a bicycle, but much huger, weighed hundreds of pounds each. But when it was running, it would be just smooth as silk. You just watch it just a little bit at a time, going on up until it reached the top. But every once in a while, something would go bad with it. Something would fail or whatever. And I was watching it when they were hauling a vessel that was probably too large, especially for the condition that the thing was in at the time. And I think maybe the guy who was running it didn't know how to do it either, or not much. But it stopped and failed with a ship on it, and must have been there a few weeks, neither up nor down. And I'm sure the owner was upset. I mean, the owner of the ship. But they finally managed to get it done. But inside the building, which was all clear story all the way to the top, the machinery was just phenomenal if you're interested in old-fashioned steam machineries. And I can only imagine that it's all still there today. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anybody. At one point, I wanted to get a sailing dinghy of about 15 feet with old-fashioned sails on it and so on, and sail people out to see it and to look through the old building and everything. But that never came to pass. The shop was wonderful, and it got worse and worse down through the years. But some of the tools were fantastic. I mean, ancient tools. Because I think when they ended the operation, they just walked away. The ship had to have its keel resting on what is, they call it the car. Nowadays on a railway like that, it's a car with either movable support or whatever, so that the ship doesn't roll over on its side. It goes up fairly straight, really straight if they're really working hard and doing it right. But what they were doing was hauling ships that were probably 150 feet long or maybe longer, and they could transform all that weight into various places along the railway with the weight onto sprockets and so on, which is the way big things work. They can't do anything with friction like on a small yacht or whatever. The last one that I saw was probably I'd say 140-foot commercial vessel, and it stopped, and it was there for a long time. Back when I was 63. But we saw, down through the years, we saw a few haul-outs that were tried and probably would have made it if the people had known more or if it had been in better condition, the machinery and so forth. Some of them may have been just hauled to change a part in the propeller or something of that sort, but not much of that because it was a good long day or day and a half. It wasn't fast, it wasn't quick, but it was the way they were doing it in the 19th century and forth. And it was a shame when they quit, but it would have been worse. Somebody wanted to get the building and cut the building down and more or less end it. And luckily that never happened. In other words, when I left down there, the pieces for the railway were all repairable. They could have been, some of them could have been pulled out of spares that are up in back of the building or whatever. And nobody ever got in there and tore the building all up because that would have been a shame.
My name is Marjorie Marianne Magras, Marjorie Magras. Well, my first memories of Hassel Island was that my grandfather, Pierre Magras, was born over there. And we used to tease him that his mother, coming from St. Bart's, didn't quite make it to St. Thomas and had to stop in Hassel Island to have the baby.
Would he have been born in a private home, or was there a facility over there?
He didn't say, but I believe there was some kind of a hospital, correct me if I'm right, some kind of a hospital over there, or medical facility, health place.
And what years what time frame would this have been?
1880s,
Wow.
1890s. I also learned from my grandmother, Philomene Magras Griot, that she had a garden on Hassel Island, and they would walk across. There was a very shallow pathway between Villa Olga and Hassel Island, and they would walk over there, tend to their garden, and then bring the vegetables or fruits or whatever back over to St. Thomas.
Do you know how large of a garden it was?
I don't know. She never.
And what kind of vegetables?
It was mostly, what did they use? Pumpkins and that kind of stuff. Whatever they needed for soup and stews and whatever they cooked. Peppers.
Is this something that other people did as well? Or
I believe so. I was never told that, but I believe they did.
And do you know why they would choose on Hassel Island? Was it the soil quality, or?
It probably had a little bit more land than was around their homes. Their homes are all very close together, not a whole lot of yard space. So those who didn't have a yard went over there to till the soil. Well, Hassel Island was to us kids, it was a kind of restricted place, as Roy said. We were told, or we were led to believe that it was a place that kids didn't go to because of ghosts and spirits and whatever.
Okay, my name is Manfred Dittrich. I'm here since 1963 on Hassel Island having the sail loft. And I came over in 1958, sailed an 80-foot boat over. I was 24 years old. And I spent 2 years here sailing on some 2 boats. We jumped ship, we sailed on some boats, and I learned in English that time, and then spent here 2 years. And then I got a job offered in Miami to make sails for 7 big ships, which I did. And then I kept in touch with Captain Jack Carstaffen, which he had a Brixham trawler in Down Street. And they had sort of a small little sail loft on Hassel Island. And they called it the Hassel Island Yacht Club, which was very, very small. And I was leaving the boats. I had 3 years, and I trained about 600 guys, and I wanted to do a change. And and I had an urge getting on my own somehow, and like a woman has to have a baby, right? I had the urge to get on my own. So I got a letter from Jack staff, and they come here. We started getting busier now. We had 10 big boats here in the harbor, and that was just after the Cuban crisis. And then since after that, the Virgin Islands came up very fast. And I thought, well, I'd try it here, and I came down with somebody else. He was a carpenter, and we was going to do both, and then he wanted to get bigger and started furniture stores. So after 2 years, I gave this up again. Well, I always got this place from Jack Carstaffen, this Hassel Island. There was trees growing to the buildings, and we had to lay power, and so time went on. I just continued sailmaking, and the years went by. It was very, very good years, and so we made sails for many boats. St. Thomas got bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know, for the better it was not. Maybe for business-wise it was better. And then all of a sudden some other people came, and at the most we had 15 people living over here. And this long building was built by the Navy. It had a couple little rooms, and some people just squatted there. I was the only legal resident I got this place from Mr. Paiwansky, Ralph and Isidore, mainly Isidore. He was a great historic, and I saw him myself. He had plans from Pan American, not American Airlines, Pan American. They wanted to buy Hassel Island from him. At that time, I forgot 16 million or 20 million. And he tore the plans up. He said, I don't want condos here in the hills. That's going to be a historic place. He could have sold the island for a lot more than he got from the park, I think. And but I give him credit for that. He wanted to keep everything natural. He didn't want to have big condos in the hills and big buildings. No. Pan American Airlines. The big airline, they was going to buy it. Oh, they would have built a high-rise here or condos in the hills. It would have been another Frenchman's Reef. Everybody likes Hassel Island, you know. Just one time, I picked up 5 o'clock in the morning. I picked up a French here. He was swimming. He had no boat, and I picked him up, threw him in a dinghy, and I said, I have to get some gas for my other dinghy. I have to go to Hassel Island first. Oh, no, can't go there. Bunch of crazy people live over there. So I guess I kept other people.
So let's talk a little bit about Creque Marine Slipway, if we could. So when you first came here, what was that like? It was still in operation?
Well, it was owned by the Creque still, I think, and then Mr. R. Bala, he had the Slipway going, and they had a repair shop too. But they had a small little donkey engine in front. The boilers wasn't working as I came there. And they pulled out a Rara Avis, a 3-masted schooner. It was built in Holland, I think. And in fact, the captain who I started sailing with as I was 17 years old, he skippered that boat. And he pulled it out, and I think the boat was too heavy. Something went wrong with the railway. So then that was the end of the Slipway. They didn't want to put any money in it. And that maybe the Creque family never wanted to give him a real reason. I don't know what the reason was for it.
So did you meet any of the Creque family? Did you know them?
Yeah, I know. I forgot the name. There was once one lady. She worked for Public Works. She was I think the woman kept everything in order. And there was two other brothers, because I had a deal with her one time. Some friend of mine wanted to buy Norman Island, and she was in charge of that. I don't know, but it didn't work out.
And so you said the name of the ship, the last ship that was ever pulled up there was called, what was the name again?
Rara Avis. R-E-R-A. That means a funny bird.
Okay. So Laura Avis.
Yeah.
And you're saying the main steam engine was not functioning at that time.
No, that's out at least 100 years, yeah.
So they had the secondary engine, and you called that what?
Yeah.
What did you call the donkey engine?
Yeah, well, it's a gasoline engine, they had that in front to pull the thing. Yeah, just a normal, I don't think it even was diesel, it was a gas engine, just a big Chevy block, reduced gear.
So over there, it looks like it's an old car. Is that what that
Yeah,
was?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so what did they use? Was it chain link or what was
Wire, they had wires.
It was wire
I think
to
they had
pull
the
the-
spools of wires too.
Okay, so like cable
Yeah.
or solid?
Big heavy cable, yeah.
And that would also, would the ship then go back on its own weight, or would they have to
No,
push
they had a reverse gear in it, Very primitive.
it was a wooden ship? Or
Pardon?
was it steel or wood? The
It
ship
was steel. Yeah. So it was 120 feet.
Do you know what repairs were done on her?
Mainly they just wanted to take her out and then paint her.
Straight bottom?
Paint the bottom. And there was a couple old wooden boats, carpenter there from down islands. They was recaulking boats. They lived on the island. I know that the signal station above, those people lived up there in that little house. And then they had donkeys to carry stuff up, and then somebody's idea was to have a jeep, and they turned the jeep over. So that was the end of the jeep. So they back to the donkeys. And they didn't have the range lights those days. That's why we had the lights up there, and then it was too expensive to keep all those guys. So they put the range lights up in the hills.
How many guys were up there?
3, 4
Yeah.
were working, maybe 4 more to sleeping there.
So I guess they worked for them.
Who did the signal station guys work for?
Well, the government, I think the Port Authority didn't exist those days, Yeah, I think just for the... Yeah, they took their food and all the stuff they needed. There was 3 guys living up there. It's a small little house up there, and they kept their job was just to keep the lights going. Yeah, there's a mast up there, and they had the lights up there.
Okay.
I think I honestly never really went up there as it was working. I was so busy in my own little world, get my business going. And so. When you look back, what you should have done, But then we were busy to party up in the Royal Mail Inn, That was Herman Walk. He wrote a book there, Yeah, I met him briefly, yeah. And Harry Goodhart, he owned it. Well, I don't know if he owned the property or had a lease on it from someone. Anyway, Mr. Isidore Paiwonsky bought it from somebody. I forgot $250,000 for that little corner. And he wanted that spot, really bad. Oh, it was a beautiful little hotel, very small, especially for all the freeloaders. Everybody was eating and drinking for free there. I think it was great, Somebody said it cost Mr. Pavonsky about $250,000 a year just to keep the place open. But they made a lot of money in other ways with their stores. So we called it Isidore's Country Club. music, and there was a French couple had a restaurant. They had a French restaurant, you know. But like boats are very expensive, so I don't think how they could make any money because they had to drive back and forth all the time, people back and forth. I know how much it cost us for we have 3 dinghies, how much it cost us for our boats, you know. And I know how much the national park pays for their boats. I don't even want to think about it.
So what was Mr. Wook like?
Pardon me?
When you met Mr. Wook, Herman Wook?
Oh, I honestly really only meet him very briefly. He was a nice man, you know. But, no, I only know it was one donkey always there, and they gave him so much rum one day he got drunk and fell over the seawall, the poor thing. He was a drunken donkey.
And drowned, or?
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't stop the carnival.
Hi, my name is Willie Wilson. I'm a longtime St. Thomas resident, having moved here in 1958. We're talking here about Hassel Island. I'm also a teacher and a published author, and I have a great interest in the people and history of these islands. And when I came down here, there was no Cub Scouts, no Boy Scouts, no organized anything. So you made your own fun. My next door neighbor, fortunately, was the grandson of the local harbor master, Engel Simmons. And so I met this interesting stranger, a couple of years older than me. And he was he was a boy's boy. He could dive, he could climb, he could make things and camp. And so he said, well, let's go over to Hassel Island to camp. And so we took the pilot boat, which is available to us because his grandfather was a harbor master, dropped us off in Hassel Island. We spent the night on what was then a beach that's out toward the fort on the point where the little dock is now. And we spent 2 days there, 3 days and 2 nights. And of course, my parents, who would never have done something like that in the States. At this point, the Virgin Islands, you know, here he is, you can go off, come back, try not to kill yourself type of thing. You're out there, you've got a machete, you got a knife, you got a pellet pistol, you got lots of matches, all sorts of things go wrong, and of course, they don't, because it's an adventure and you want to do the best you can. So we went out that first day and came back in one piece, and I remember sitting on the porch of his grandfather's house, which sort of overlooked the harbor. It was on Synagogue Hill, just over the rooftops, because the harbor master, he had to be able to see the mouth of the bay and West Indian dock. And they were sitting there, and I remember his uncle saying, but Granddaddy, why you don't tell the boys them about the graveyard out there in Hassel Island? And we thought, you know, okay, well, yeah, we heard that sort of stuff. You know, you should not really have. No, it's a real graveyard out there. And they told him it was looted, and the graves were open. So of course, to a child of 10 and 12, that's sufficient, excitement to explore and find out whether it's true or not. And so the day that we went to look for the graveyard, keep in mind, there had not been anybody up there for a long time. I don't know anybody other than Captain Simmons, who actually knew the history, and that the graveyard was looted by Danish sailors in 1917. He could tell us about those things. And so we headed up there, but it was nothing but catch and keep, pingwings, stinging nettle, iguanas all over the place, Jack Spaniards. It was a nightmare. And we had a vague kind of map, which I think we probably had upside down. My friend did most of the chopping in the bush, and after a few hours, we just gave up and we went back to the campsite. But my friend was more diligent than I, and he said, okay, so tomorrow we're going to go back there and try again. And so we picked up where we left, and sure enough, we started stumbling on walls. And one wall would lead to another. We started blindly groping around in this fields of pingwing, which is swords of plants, very sharp, easy to get cut up. And we finally arrived at the graveyard, and we realized that suddenly, when we came upon it, and it was this heart-stopping thing, realizing, okay, this really exists, and we're about to go inside. Now, in those days, there was still a gate. which came down during a hurricane probably about 20 years ago. But I remember the first thing that we saw when we walked in the gate was a broken masonry crucifix on its side. And that image is seared into my mind at this, from now as the sort of the emblematic symbol of what we were about to experience. So this is the Hardy Boys on steroids. We walk in, one grave had been completely emptied out, and had apparently the dirt from it had been thrown into the other one that they'd already emptied out. Then there was a row of tombs, of 4 tombs on the left. A little further ahead, a couple more graves. One of them had a skull in it. It was the first skull, which gave us a shock. Most of the bones were not there. Now, whether goats ran away with them, or mongoose, or bugs, or whatever, but there were plenty identifiable bones, but there were only 2 skulls. And one skull, there's actually a picture of that on the cover of this book, had hair still rooted in it. And of course we poked around the skull and tried to get the 2 skulls together and take a picture of it. There was also a coffin, well actually not a coffin, the lead liner of the coffin that had not rotted away, and so you really saw the whole thing. And I remember poking around in some what seemed to be haze that had been stuffed into this coffin. Maybe the person had a disease or something, I'm not sure, but I remember this dust rising from it, and both of us recoiling because it really seemed like the smell of death. Now, we went back there many times, and my friend took photographs and whatnot of it. Well, we would go on the pilot boat. But that's when I lived next to Ricky. That's when his father was the pilot, the harbor master. And that meant in those days that they literally, if they saw a ship coming in, they would race outside the harbor. The people would throw down a rope ladder. He'd climb up and bring the ship in, because heaven forbid somebody should have an accident in the mouth of the harbor and block the harbor up. But once he was not there, I didn't have access to the ferry, which went out there. The reason it went out there is it was ferrying the night watchman for the signal station. So most people don't know what the signal station was, but it was very active. There were 4 discs that were hoisted into different positions on a mast-like contraption. And the configurations, if you had a different disc at different levels, they would be able to say there's a ship coming from the southwest, southeast, what registry it was, what kind of ship it was. So the harbor master in his office in the Senate building could, with binoculars, look at that, be alerted to the fact long before he could actually see the boat that somebody had to get out there and take care of business. So, but after my connection with the pilot boat was lost, then we went out on the Royal Mail. Well, it was just a restaurant out there. There were 2, I'm not sure which is first. I think the Goodhart's originally had a restaurant out there and maybe some guest cottages. And then it became the Royal Mail Inn, and there was always a little ferry that would get you back and forth from there. Yeah, it was fairly genteel in a tropical way, not many. There was a pool. It was I think it was a freshwater pool. Years ago, I lived in the house out there, not Royal Mail, but what was the Paiwansky House, later the Paiwansky House. We were moving from town to Canton. We had 3 weeks, and we lived out there. So, of course, you've got the former Paiwansky residence. Then you have the Royal Mail. Now there are a couple of more apartments. I don't know what the situation. And then you come around to the Creque rail yard. Now, remember, in true Hardy Boy fashion, we always thought, the Creque family, whether this is true or not, are apparently discovered treasure at some point. Have you ever heard that? Okay, they discovered treasure, supposedly on Norman Island. My father would, romanticize it, make it sound a lot easier than that. But and the legend was that what happened to the thing, that some bracelet or some trinket from the treasure chest would be handed down over the years to various descendants. And of course we had concocted the idea that actually it was hiding It was hiding out there in that tall chimney at the rail yard. So we got ourselves worked up into a frenzy. Again, once again, adventure. Here's a fantasy, but we did. We went there and we tried to see if we could look into the chimney. Of course, there's a leprosarium around the corner. And most of our time, though, was really spent when it wasn't at the graveyard. It was on the beach on the southeast coast, which was a decent beach. There was real live sand there. And also out the fort and up at the signal station. And since the national park has been over there, of course, there have been things that have been discovered that I did not know were there. One thing that we did know were there is right above Prince Rupert, there is a platform where these big tanks were. Now, I'm not sure if they're water or oil, but they were still very much solid. Now all of that's buckled, and there's just these buckled sheets of rusting stuff. So, you know, all this history, occasionally you'll see a picture from the 1800s, and you'll see big signs out by the mouth of the harbor advertising stuff. So, you know, the island has a history known to itself, and, you know, we are able to, you know, share in the history the way it is today. But very few people have been to Hassel Island, even nowadays. When people say that, when I talk about Hassel Island, I say, can we go out there? Yeah, you can. Well, you know, we would go over on, in fact, this picture that I just showed you of the two of us. I don't know what I just showed here. This picture with me here and my friend here taking 1958, you can see the pilot boat coming to pick us up. The guy who took the picture was the guy who had just come from the signal station, and his replacement was on his way. Now, up at the signal station, they had a pretty good gig up there. They had a couple of sugar apple trees. They had a garden and stuff. They did their cooking and whatnot. Later, there was a phone set up there. Originally, there wasn't a phone, but so guys would go out there usually for a couple of days, and then they would come in. And so we interacted with them a little bit, but not too much. These were West Indian guys who might have worked for, you know, the equivalent of DPNR back in those days. And they would have not a uniform, but they would have a sort of standard khaki fatigue clothes that they would wear.
Did you ever witness any boats being hauled out?
Well, you know, my father had a glass-bottom boat. In fact, that's why we came down here. A very, very perilous enterprise. I thought as a kid, glass-bottom boat, what's my father getting into? And in fact, the glass broke once, and so we had to haul it, and so it was pulled up. To be honest with you, I was probably in school when they did this. And the glass bottom was probably 24 feet, very small.
Do you remember any of the people working over there in particular?
Not really. There really weren't. It wasn't like an active thing. You didn't see a lot of people hanging around. I think that there were probably a couple of people that could be called upon to do it. But even then, you know, it's glory days when they're pulling big boats up. I never saw any big boats up there. Maybe a couple of 40 or 50 foot, you know, work boats. But I'm sure, you know, look at the chains that they have. They must have pulled up some really large vessels. And the big wheels in the shipyard, you know, it looks like something from the Industrial Revolution. And you say, how did they make this stuff? And where did they make it? How did they import it? How do they put it up together? And when something breaks down, what do? Go back to Liverpool, England, or wherever you manufacture this stuff? It's amazing.
My name is Roy McGrath, R-O-Y, M-A-G-R-A-S. I am a board member of the Frenchtown Civic Organization, and currently I am the individual. I really don't have a position, I guess for all intents and purposes. I'll call myself the manager of the French Heritage Museum. And I do remember as a kid going over with my friend Steve in a 1.5 horsepower dinghy that we would take from Villa Olga over to Hassel Island to the forbidden fortresses and ruins of Hassel Island. I say forbidden because we had to do it outside of my parents' knowledge because it was strictly forbidden to go there. But as boys, it was adventurous. We would explore the ruins over there. I remember finding artifacts that in those days didn't really resemble very much. They were basically documents that were found inside of some of the buildings, but it meant really nothing to us except that they were treasures that were found. The only other incident that I recall of Hassel Island is discussions that I had with my eldest brother regarding the fact that my mother moved here to St. Thomas when she was 5 years old, and the likelihood is that, similar to Marjorie's story, that they actually landed on the island on Hassel Island, and then they would make the trek across Haulover in the middle of the night to join their family here in Frenchtown. So as you can well imagine, my mother was 5 years old at that time, and having to walk across Haulover in the middle of the night was probably a terrifying experience. And that's why we believe that my mother opted to not marry a fisherman, in addition to the fact that her nephew actually drowned in what this area right now that we call Frenchtown, which is the dredged portion of the ocean. His name was Florville McGrath, and he died as a teenager doing the same thing that we were forbidden to do, which is going out in boats in the ocean in the middle, middle of the day or the middle of the night. So she had these childhood experiences that probably prompted her to not marry a fisherman.
My name is Elizabeth O'Bain, better known as Lelel in the whole of Frenchtown.
What year were you born in?
1929, March 16th. I'm 87 years old. Going in 88, but that's all right. I'm climbing 54 steps every day, sometimes 3 times a day.
And you were born here?
Yeah.
In St. Thomas?
Right here in St. Thomas, in this same little house. All my brothers and sisters was born here the same way. I had no problem in going to hospital. We were all born at home. Everybody. My mother had 15 of us, but only 10 live until they were old enough, and they passed away. I lost one here that she got killed with a wall. And they were fixing a wall, a retaining wall, and the wall caved in, and she got killed with it. I was in 64. At that time, my brother was in St. John, having himself a ball with his friends for the 4th of July. I had to call him at 11 o'clock at night. I went down radio station because we had a radio station down below us. And I went and called them to please get him to St. Thomas as fast as possible. So he came down, he got in a wreck on the boat at the Red Hook. They had to swim ashore, got the whole bottom of the boat to remain on the reef. So that was it. So I've been struggling ever since with my little one. I had one that was a handicap. I had my husband blind for 23 years. I struggled with all of that. And now, like I told them, now I'm free and I'm going to enjoy my life as long as the good Lord give it to me. On Hassel Island, when I was there, I was taking care of 5 kids. And they used to bring the boats up for repair. And one day, this boat from Panama came up, and they had to rip a piece of the bottom of the boat because something was wrong with it, where the keel was. and they used to put pitch on it like it's a tar. And the bucket, the guy was handing the bucket to the one down below, and it got away and hit the guy. And he was covered from head to foot in pitch. So all I could have done was run in the kitchen and get some bucket of ice and put it on him. And when the doctor came, the doctor said that it was the best thing I had done was putting the ice on him. It cooled him right away because the heat of the earth. But he was all, his flesh was all already starting to bubble up. But they took him and they sent him to Puerto Rico because being it was the people from Panama, they paid all the expenses, sent him to Puerto Rico. And he stayed there for almost 6 months. So they to rebuild his body because it was burned bad, real bad. Well, I don't remember his name. He was from St. Martin. He was family to Mr. Richardson, but I don't remember his name. But he was family to home and them. He was one of the uncle. He was burned so bad. He was really burned bad. His skin had all burned up. And then I had the kids to take care of. And the woman came and she became an alcoholic. I had trouble with her all the time because she was always drunk and wanted to hit the kids. And it was only a year, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. The oldest one was only 6 years old. So I went shopping the one day, and when I came back from shopping, she had him tied in a chair. And I asked her, Sister Amalie, why did you do that for? Well, he disgusting, and he wouldn't listen. I said, Junior is not doing you nothing. Leave him alone. So I called her husband and I told him what she was doing. So he came from his job and he told her, don't do that again. Then the security guard that was there on the island, he came over and asked me what happened. So we called the grandfather and we had her put to the hospital because she was really going out of hand. Because the doctor said she had too much alcohol in her system, so she was going out of her mind, and she was taking the revenge on the kids. I stayed there for 2.5 years with her, and trying to keep the place in order. Because they used to have so many boats coming in almost every week. Every week had a different boat would come in, different people. And one day this guy asked me if it had iguanas. So I said, yes, they're all in a mango tree. Okay, there was about 6 mango trees there, but there was some big iguanas. And he went and he took 3 iguanas and he went with them. So the afternoon, about 2:30 going and 3 o'clock, he bring me a platter of food. So, excuse me. So he said, that's the stew meat. He had stew meat and rice and plantain and vegetables and everything was in the platter. So I knew what it was, so I put it on the fridge. And she came down from upstairs. She asked me, what did you cook? I said, well, the chicken is in the oven. I don't want a chicken. I said, well, there's meat on top of the stove, on top of the fridge. She said, what kind of meat? I said, stew meat. So she sat and ate it, and after she had eaten it, I had to run because I told her she had eaten iguana. And she said, it's today you're going to lose your life. I said, no, I'm not. I said, you asked for food and I gave you food. An hour after she told me, it was delicious. After she took the empty plate and she threw it through the door.
And this, what was her name?
Amalie.
So how did you used to get across to Hassel Island?
Rowboat. Yeah.
But they didn't, and the Caribbean.
And then we used to walk. We used to walk the reef. We used to walk across the reef. There was a reef there. It's after in 1941. Yeah, it was a reef that was there. And after the Houston came in, they started to dig the thing because of the plane that were coming in at that time. They had a big Pan American plane. Never used to be down there. It used to be the wharf. They had a big wharf right on the waterfront. Right where Caravan Hotel is, a little higher up. That's where the Pan American used to come in. And after that, they started to dig the reef more and more. So finally, when the foremast schooner came in and she went against the reef, they said it was time enough to dig the whole area out. So they went down as far as 52 feet to make the reef so that the boats could come in, so the keel of the boat wouldn't stick in the reef again. And after that, I was there. I wasn't walking across to take the boat, take the rowboat and come across. And one day she hide the oars so I don't go. And it was, on Water Island had soldiers at the point. And they saw me in the boat. I was trying to paddle with my hand out to get the boat to shore. One of the soldiers came in his boat and dug me and put me to Olga, to the dock. Yeah, that's how it got. And he asked me, he said, what were you doing? I said, running away from a crazy woman. Because she had a machete after me and I wasn't going to leave her touch me with no machete. Yeah, she was bad when she was drunk. She used to look for everything. And her husband had a big cabinet full of guns, all kind of guns. It was awful in there. I was afraid of she getting involved in the cabinet. So I used to hide the keys. And one day I opened the cabinet of the kids for the clothes, and I'll come out with a pile of bigger cans and about 69 bottles. So I called her husband and said, look, you better come home. I got my hand full. She said, why? I said, Samri, the children have clothes, I can't get them. She got a pile of beer cans and whiskey bottles inside the cabinet. He was so mad. He sent her to Panama. And because she was originally from Panama. And when she came, when they went down, about 6 months later, they called me and they told me her oldest sons called me that she died because she overdosed herself. She took something that the doctors had there for her and she drank the whole bottle. And when the doctor came in now to check her out, they find her dead on the bed. She had overdosed herself. But the two older kids was not Henry owned, it was John Seaman was the two boys' father, because she was married before.
Where was the house in Hassel?
The big house is still, the frame is still there, but all of it is busted up because of Marilyn. Marilyn took all the front of it, all the other rooms, everything except where the big pipe is. That's all standing of it right now. But they're repairing it now. I see they move in on it to repair it. Somebody got the how they call it? It's taken over by some company anyhow that they're making like a garden of some kind there. They have all kind of things there, but I haven't been there to see it. And it's a landmark, so they got it now to restore it into what it was. And some other guy came asking me the same thing, how the building was made. I told him what it was. So he said they were trying to get it back the same way. I said, no, that was made in the Danish time. You're not going to have that done like where the Dane man them had them. I said, it was Danish people that had the property. He said, oh, you know about that? I said, yeah, I live there, so I know what I'm talking about. And when the fire caught for the carnival, the fire caught over there, I was standing right there watching the fireworks. And I turned to a friend that was sitting on the yard. I said, you know what? I said, the island is on fire. She said, how you mean? I said, that place is on fire. And I said, if it gets into the diesel that they have back at that house, I said, we'll have St. Thomas will be gone. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, yes, I do. I said, there's 16 drums of diesel in that tank that is behind there. I said, I tell you what I know. It's not that nobody tell me, it's what I know about it. So when one of the firemen asked me how come I know all about that. I said I used to live there, so I know what I'm talking about. It's not that I'm telling you a story, I'm telling you the truth. So when they went, they found out it was true. The tank was covered all right, but the oil was still there. I said, that catch, Villa Olga wasn't going to be Villa Olga. It was going to be ashes. And we would have taken, because the fire was reaching all the hill already. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. And I was the one that called the fire department. They tell me it's because I was drinking. I said, excuse me? I said, I don't drink, mister. Whoever you is, you're very rude and fresh. I said, I don't drink. I said, I'm standing watching the fire. And I say, I know what I'm talking about. So one of the senators was on a badge. And she came and asked me the same question. And I told her, I said, you see where I'm standing? Come and see for yourself. You'll see the fire. And when she saw it, she opened up. And they had to get the badge from Puerto Rico with water, the helicopters with water, and still they couldn't control. They had to put this foam on it. It was bad. They fight till the next day to conquer that fire. It was just taking the trees and everything with it. And it had Commander Works' house, Dr. Griffith's house. There was another doctor there, I can't remember his name, he was an eye specialist. And there was another company that was on the other side. And all of that had oil in the area. And I keep telling them the same thing. What do you know about it? I said, I used to travel all through the bushes and go to different places. I said, I work with Commander Works because I wash his clothes and iron his wife's clothes when she worked at the hospital. I said, so I know all of them. I said, Dr. Griffith was another one I used to do his clothes. He said, well, you work all around? I said, yes, I work all around. And then when they made the bar and restaurant that they had there, they wanted me to work there, and I told them no. I wasn't working in no bar. And then after that, I quit going over there. After she get the kids and everything else, I quit going over Hassel Island. Then I went to go work to the main house with the old man, Mr. Harmon. I only spent there for a couple of weeks because the maid had gotten sick and they had 5 young kids too. They wanted me to take over the kids of the other family. So I worked with them for a couple of months and that was it. That was my miserable life. Would. But I like Hassel Island because you could go all on the beach and go fish and everything. I used to willfully take the kids, the older one, and throw a little line. And just for the fun of it, they catch the little fishes and then make them loose it over. But one day they caught me and they told me, no, you can't do that. I said, it's for the fun of the kids. It's not for me. We ain't going to eat them. They're too small to put in a frying pan.
So did you live over there, or did you go back and forth?
No, I used to live. I stayed there. The only time I used to come over was on Saturday. But I used to live there night and day. I had my own room and everything next to the kids. They had 5 rooms upstairs, bedrooms. Then they had the kitchen downstairs. They had another room for the maid, as they call it, the lady who used to wash the clothes. They had a room for her. Yeah, the big house. It's still, the frame is still there. Yeah, the big one that have the tower.
Mm-hmm.
You can see, I think, the tower, you can see the sea from here. If I can see from here. That's how the thing is. She decided to work on it. Decided to work on it. That was the house, the new house. That they just built not too long ago, but that was the new house there.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the house. It was a real big house.